Hello and welcome to this DDi What's New CADcast. My name is Cody Armstrong and the topic today is SolidWorks Costing Part 1. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be getting into the new features for SolidWorks Costing and the 2014 release, so let's jump right into it. One of the first things I want to get into are some of the new costing options in SolidWorks 2014. So, let's jump right into the software. Now, before, in previous releases of SolidWorks Costing, we really didn't have a global set of options. If you wanted to configure an option for costing, it was basically held in the template. With the 2014 release, when you call up costing, you're going to see a new icon in the top left corner. It says Costing Options. These are global options for all costing. In other words, not template specific. And it allows me to define a few different things we really didn't have a lot of control over in previous versions. For instance, fixed costs for bins, HIMs, and library features. Also, the ability to specify machining templates for sheet metal parts. This was a previous limitation, so if you had a combination of machining features and sheet metal features, you had to run one or the other. In the newest release, you now have the option to apply machining template for sheet metal parts. We also have some other volume recognition options that I'm going to get into when we get into volume features later on. But this option set, this dialog, and the ability to apply global option settings is new for the 2014 release. Also new, you can save as costing default settings. Right, so I can set these as the default costing settings. So that is the new costing options in SolidWorks 2014. So the next thing I want to get into is converting circular cut paths to drilled holes. And I want to jump right into it and show you an example of kind of how this works. And the big thing about this is in the costing options, you must have it set to use machining template for sheet metal parts. This is a machining template setting, so if it's set to sheet metal template, you will not see this option. And basically the way it works is when you run costing using a machining template and you have cut paths, right? For instance, this is obviously a sheet metal part, but there are some machining operations, so of course there's cut paths in here as well. If it recognizes some features as cut paths, but you prefer them to be milling operations, drilling operations, you can now right-click, change to drill. Again, this only applies if you're using a machining template and you have sheet metal parts, but in that scenario, you can change it to a drilling operation. Okay? And it, of course, applies it to the milling operations. So that's the option, change to drill. You'll see it in the right-click menu for cut paths, circular cut paths, when defining using a machining template. Let's jump back. Okay, so next on the list are the enhancements to costing reports. So let's jump right into it and get into some of the new things you'll notice for costing reports in 2014. One of the first ones you'll see when you go to generate a report in costing is support for Excel-based costing reports. In previous versions, we only had Word docs as options for costing reports. Now you'll see Excel is also a supported format. So that's one of the new enhancements, support for Excel docs. Also new is the support for input of header information, what we're calling enhancements to header information. It's really just the ability to add information to put into the header of a costing report. And what it's going to look like, at least by default, is these menus are going to be collapsed. So you have to expand out company information and quote information to punch this data in. But I think this makes it much more usable for those trying to use costing reports as a quote, because now I can come in and punch in, for instance, the company name, right? I can punch in the quote number, perhaps the company associated with this quote, date, all kinds of associated information. Things like logo. I can include my company logo in the header, right? Just by browsing to it, or maybe a URL. So there's lots of different properties and things that I could publish to or put into my published Word doc, but this all gets appended and added to the header of the finished costing report. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. Of course, this is going to take a second to run, but once this is done, I'll get a report with all those properties that I punched in the header of that report. So again, I think this is really useful for those trying to create quotes out of their costing reports, because it allows me to put in all this additional info upon creation of that report. So here it is, the finished result. You'll see quote number 1234, the company name ABC, my company name XYZ. So this is essentially what I'm punching in to that form to get out of my costing template. So that is the enhancements to costing reports. Let's move on. So creating a limited access costing template is one enhancement that a lot of users have been asking for since the release of costing. And what this basically means is, if I'm a manufacturer, for instance, maybe I'm a machine shop as an example, and I want to be able to send someone else my template and allow them to use it to calculate their own cost before they send me the parts to be manufactured, I essentially had to send someone my template and give them the entire breakdown of everything I do to manufacture that part. So now what I can do as a manufacturer, as a machine shop for as an example, when I go to modify a template, I'm just going to call up a template here, and then we're going to launch the template editor. When I go to launch the template editor and I make my modifications, I do all the things I need to do to make all the adjustments. When you go to do a save, there's a new option to save as limited access copy. Right? You'll see save as limited access copy, and what this does is allows you to save a file that cannot be opened or edited. So I can send that file to whoever I may want to use that template, and when they load that template, I'm going to load one here, you'll notice they cannot launch the template editor. So give it a second to load here, and what you'll notice is that button grays out. So the moment you load a limited access template, you no longer have the option to launch the template editor, meaning the people that are using my template may not be or are not able to see all the details that I punched into the template. So definitely useful in the scenario of a manufacturer trying to allow engineers or other customers, potentially even vendors, to see your or to use your templates without being able to see all the details of that template. So that's limited access costing templates. Let's move on. So next one on the list is custom properties for costing. And this is a really easy one to show. It's just going to take a second. But basically what it means is out of the box in 2014, you're going to have a standard set of costing properties. So if I go to File Properties on the Custom tab in the drop-down in the list, you will now see a set of costing specific properties. Total cost, material cost, manufacturing cost, material name, template size, so on. So these are all properties that are specific to costing, and of course they tie in with the next line item in my presentation, and that is bill of materials. So now we have costing specific properties included out of the box with SolidWorks 2014, and that takes me to the next item on my list, which is generating costing bombs. So I've got all these new custom properties, and now what I want to be able to do is of course use them in a bill of materials. So what I've done is I've just put together a real quick assembly, and on a couple of these parts I've run costing and then saved that with the particular component. So let's just open up a clamp here, and if I go to File Properties, you'll see costing's already been run. And if I go to File Properties, Custom, you'll see a total cost property there linked to the total cost value. So costing's been run on a few of the components in this particular assembly, I think just 2 of them, and I just want to do this as an example to show you how this is going to work. So I'm going to insert a bill of materials, and I'm just going to do it right here in the assembly, but the steps would be the same in the drawing. Insert tables, of course, bill of materials. What you're going to notice when you browse for table templates is a new one called BOM costing. And this is a bill of materials template specific to costing, meaning it has all those properties that I showed you just a moment ago already added to the bill of materials. So if you do a lot of the mapping to custom properties with costing properties, it's a very easy template to call up and get all that stuff into it. You don't have to build it yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert this, and we'll just kind of place it out in space here. But the main thing I want to show you is you'll see cost, total cost. For instance, I had cost, total cost, and I put, there's the associated cost from costing for the 2 components that I ran costing on. So if you run costing a lot, you could even take something like this and figure out a total cost for the entire assembly, assuming I've run costing on all the particular components of that assembly. So that this is the new costing BOM option. You'll see it when you're inserting a bill of materials. It's just a different type of BOM template. Let's jump back. Alright, so working our way down the list, the next one is including percentage scrap and sheet metal costing. And so this is specific to using sheet metal templates. So make sure again that you're specifying sheet metal templates. Also make sure your costing options are set to use sheet metal templates for sheet metal parts. But when you have those things defined and you're using sheet metal templates, you'll have an option here under blank size for percent scrap. And so if you're nesting a lot of parts and you know that you're going to have 10% scrap out of every part that's cut, you can factor that into the overall end cost with this percent scrap option under blank size in SolidWorks Costing in 2014. And so that's the new percent scrap option, again specific to sheet metal and using sheet metal templates. Let's move on. So almost to the bottom of the list here, modifying the machined part setup is actually a setting in the templates, in the machining templates. And then that's an important note. This is not an option or a setting or a switch you're going to see in sheet metal templates, but in machining templates, when you launch the template editor as if you're going to edit the template, under the machine tab, you're going to see 3 new columns. Load, unload time, literally the time it takes you to load and unload the machine. Operation setup time, right? So setup cost, setup time, so fixtures, touching off tools, work offsets, things like that, things that typically involved in the setup. And then how do you define the setup? What's known as the setup distribution. Is the setup time divided over the lot size? Is it divided over the total quantity, or is it applied once per part? A lot size is generally we get an order, we get an order for 10,000, but we only run 1,000 at a time. Well, 1,000 would be my lot size, where 10,000 would be my total quantity. Divided over lot size is a common, it's a default setting because you have to tear down and reset up for every lot that you decide to run, but you can apply it once per part or over the entire quantity. But what's new is, again, these 3 columns: load, unload time, setup time, and then how that setup time is distributed. This is specific to machining templates, but when you launch a machining template, go to the machine tab, you will see these 3 new tabs there for customizing your templates. Alright, last one on my list. So what they've done with the 2014 release is add the ability to add comments to specific tools in machining templates. So when you're defining machining template and costing, you now have the option to add specific comments to those tools, and it just really helps you to keep things organized. So let me show you an example. I'm just going to call up the template editor again, and when you're editing a machining template, when you go to define specific tools like mills, end mills, chamfer mills, drills, even lathe tools, you will see a comments box on the far right side of the tool definition. So you have all the tool definitions, feeds and speeds and so on. On the far right, you have a comments box. And this is really just helpful if I go through and define a bunch of custom tooling, and I go through and spend all the energy in defining all these custom feeds and speeds. It's helpful to add a comment to note which tool I was trying to add to that library. So it's a really useful feature when you go through and define custom feeds and speeds to note which tool you're actually referring to when you're defining those feeds and speeds. And it's just a little comment box you see in the far right corner of mill, drill, and turn style tools. So that's the new comments addition for machining templates. Again, mill, drill, and turn only. So that does it for part 1 of this CADcast. Thank you for joining us. For more, visit us at www.youtube.com/DDi CAD or www.DDiCAD.com/Tech Center. Thank you.